What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
And our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Stephanie Gala. She is the director of the Student Success Center at Azusa Pacifc University. And Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my goodness, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, we want to start. Joe and I are both very curious. Tell us about you and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I actually am an alum of Azusa Pacifc University where I work. So I've been here as staff for 15 years, but I was also here for my undergraduate program. So I did my bachelor's in social work, and then I went overseas and was working overseas for a bit, came back, and then did my master's here. I loved it so much. So I have been a part of the APU, our Azusa Pacifc University community, for a long time. And really my journey starts with I'm a first generation college student. So I was raised primarily by my grandmother. So also identifying as a former foster youth, and didn't have any idea of how to even start the journey of looking at college and what does that look like and how do you do a FAFSA. So it started there and really had people who came alongside me and saw the importance of me taking that next step in my education in that journey. And that person happened to work at APU. And so I went with that and I came here and received the support I needed. And it gave me a passion. I didn't know I was going to work in higher education. Doing social work, I knew I wanted to help other students, other people in need, but I just didn't know exactly how. It really wasn't until after I graduated and was working overseas that I started teaching English at a university there and fell in love with that and started to really see other students who needed the support that I was able to get and wanted to do that for other students. And so I've been here for 15 years trying to do that, trying to support other students in their journey.
I've got to ask overseas, where were you at?
Actually in Russia.
Oh my.
I know. Very different. Maybe another podcast for that one, but
wow.
Yeah, different experience.
That's incredible.
It was great. It was very unique. It was a part of a program here actually at APU for graduating seniors who wanted to go overseas and experience that. So I was working at the university, working with the church, and also some orphanages using some of those social work skills.
So Stephanie, why do you think the work that you're currently doing within education, why is that important? How is it impactful?
You know, I think for me, I noticed from the time when I was a student to now, there's been a lot of improvement on resourcing, right? But I do think that specifically for populations like students who are first generation college students, students of color, oftentimes institutions want to just say, here's some blanket resources for all students. But I don't think that you can just give the same thing to all people. We need to figure out what support individual students need and give them that. It's not just a one size fits all. And so I think that that's why it's so important to have academic success centers like this. And we also have federally funded grants like TRIO programs. We have a Hispanic Serving Institution Title V grant. So there's a lot of other federal funding that we have that we can actually utilize and implement programming that is really going to target and provide the resourcing that different students need. We have a really diverse student body, especially being here in Southern California. So really reaching beyond just here's blanket resources into that. Let's individualize a plan for success for our students. And that's what we're striving to do. And that's where I get passionate. I love that. I love just saying, okay, what does this student need and what's going to really help resource them to reach success?
Have you seen a change in students recently? I mean, you talk about first generation students and students who are kind of like yourself, right? Maybe coming into higher academia, maybe for the first time, generationally or otherwise. Like, what's the need in your eyes of currently of those kind of students and of students in general? So I feel like a lot has changed with the student body, with what students need from their education, what they're getting out of it right now. What's kind of your assessment of that?
I think one of the first things is I think there's a value shift when it comes to higher education and continuing into getting a bachelor's degree after high school. I think more students are working. So they're realizing the cost of education is increasing and it's only getting higher. And so in order to even afford that experience of getting a bachelor's degree, more students are having to work and more are having to work full time and or have other family obligations. And I see that more so than I remember even when I was a student. I worked and had to do that, but that wasn't the norm around me. Mm-hmm. But I think we see that a lot more. I also think even just post-COVID, I think people realized in that season, like I'm shifting my priorities, and they prioritized family and things like working instead of just focusing singularly on their education, which is great and fine. But then it is looking at like, okay, how do we get creative with academic plans, and do we have financial resourcing that can maybe help alleviate that financial burden for some of our students? I know our community colleges are doing some really incredible programs for, California residents. They can get their first 2 years tuition free, depending on the program and certain parameters in that. But that's incredible, right? So I think that's the shift. One of the first shifts that comes to mind that I've seen is there really is an emphasis for how can we help these students who want to learn, but they've got to juggle these other responsibilities, especially that financial component, given just where economy is at.
Stephanie, you were there at APU prior to COVID, prior to the pandemic, and certainly afterward. Yeah. And our priorities did shift back to paying a little more attention to things going on at home, being a little more home-centric. But what have you seen in terms of students and their learning ability after spending a couple of years, or at least a year, going remote and now being back on campus? Have the students changed in terms of how they learn and how they need to be addressed to help them learn?
I think especially early on when we came back to campus, there was just a lot less engagement. I think there was still, some nervousness to even be in class, to engage in larger events, larger lecture rooms. People were still wanting to join remotely, a lot more desire for remote learning. I can notice, I think we've shifted a little bit out of that. I see a lot more engagement. I think that students, again, I think it's that value add, because they've been through something so significant that they're like trying to figure out, like, is this class engaging me enough? Is this valuable to me now? So I think, again, there's this responsibility on the institutions to re-engage students and figure out, yes, if, they didn't get some of the foundational work with being in labs in person for their science courses. Okay, how can we help aid? What kind of support do we need to provide now? Because it's not their fault. I always will stand on the side of it's not the student's fault that they didn't get something or resourcing that they needed, right? So we need to come alongside and say, okay, so how can we have supplemental instruction or learning assistance. So we put them in the classrooms for classes that we see are writing, math, and sciences, so that students know there's an extra layer of support for them. And again, not because anything they did or didn't do, it's just the circumstances that they were in. So we really do need to find creative ways of saying, okay, where are some of those, we do DFW reports, we call it. So classes that have a high rate of a D, F, or W as a final grade. And we say, okay, how can we add in extra support in those courses for these students that might be struggling?
Makes sense. Makes good sense. It does.
Are there any links between those classes that have like high DFW reports? I mean, is there any commonality? Have you guys found anything?
I think we're pretty much seeing at our institution what mirrors kind of national norms is, our STEM courses like math and some of the sciences will be challenging for some students. And then again, the writing, I think that is another area that we see is, pretty consistent. And I think too, if you don't get to practice that well, and if you don't have some of that like instruction that's really hands-on, it does create some gaps there, right? So I can see the impacts of COVID and not maybe having that in person, someone right there on top of you showing you how to rework your essay might have caused some gaps. But I think overall, it's pretty much those like kind of key areas that we're seeing, which is similar across the board. with other benchmarks.
Well, I know COVID came up so fast.
Yeah.
And, as a professor myself at a couple of colleges, boy, we were scrambling to figure out how do we flip this all to remote and really make it work for the students. And it was a tremendous learning experience for all of us.
Absolutely.
To try to pull that off. And I think we did pretty well. But, I do still teach some remote classes, and I'm still learning too how to make them more effective in the remote setting. So
absolutely. I think like you're spot on. It was a learning for all of us. I also teach on the side, and it was a challenge just as much for our students as it was for us, just to also, we have life and things going on for us as well, than trying to, provide just quality education in that season. It was challenging for sure. But also the kind of silver lining in that for us, we've been wanting to do, remote advising events. We have commuters and we have students who are working, like I mentioned before, and they're taking classes. And so they don't have a ton of extra time. They're loading up days a week. They don't want to come back to campus for an advising appointment. But now we have Zoom, and we were wanting some of that before, but we didn't have it. So now I just think the technology and the resourcing we have, that it's really actually helped us serve students better, because now we understand how to use things, like the virtual appointments. And there's a part of me who's like, this silver lining here is that I think we are more accessible to students. We have more online courses, more programs, more diversity in what we're offering.
I totally agree. Yeah, it did give rise to some fantastic technology that we've been able to hang on to. Yeah, something good out of everything bad.
There you go.
Usually is. Usually is there. Just got to look for it sometimes.
Yes. Got to look.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder, getting rid of the labels of good and bad, how does the technology impact the student in the long run? What does the technology that we're bringing to the fore mean for students? There's all sorts of talk, obviously, now about AI and its impact on students. Are you guys doing anything, Stephanie, with AI explicitly? Do you have any forecasting about what AI is going to bring, or just technology in general is going to bring to the future of education to students? Because I have a lot of mixed feelings about that, as I think kind of everybody does, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I know AI, it is going to be, and I think can be, an incredible resource. When you look at some of just the marketing, advertising that we can do, the data that we can pull, I think, there's just an immense amount of resourcing that it can provide to us. But I think there is this now shift in how can we integrate it into the classroom, into the learning, to teach our students how to use it appropriately and ethically. So I also have the responsibility of tracking and monitoring all of our academic integrity violations for the institution. And we definitely see an increase in those academic integrity violations when it comes to students using AI, asking it, here's the prompt, write this paper. And it breaks my heart, because it's like, no, you could have used this to say, help me research this, right? But again, I think that that's on the responsibility of us as institutions, as professors, to say, okay, this is how you can use AI. But I think with any new technology, right, there's the risk of, is this going to be used for our advantage or disadvantage? And so I think for me with AI, I get excited when I see professors actually implementing the use of AI and saying, this is how you should use it. Because with anything else, our students just need to know how and what's appropriate. What are those boundaries, right? How do I guide them successfully to using this really powerful tool? I've used it. I wanted to create some surveys. I'm like, give me some sample surveys. I'm like, this is great. It's so helpful. I think that there's some really powerful ways that we, can use it. But you're right. It is. It's a good and a bad. It's kind of a mixed bag right now. I think as we're in that kind of murky middle, trying to figure out how to use it best. So but I love what it can do. I really do think there's some really great potential for it, for sure.
How do you see faculty looking at it? Are they trying to work it into the classes, or is this something that they need to be more convinced of? What's their take on it?
Oh my goodness. I think it depends on who you're talking to. So I think there's some who are like, yes, this is awesome. Let me show my students how to use this. And we have, computer information systems. Let me show them how they can use this to compare their coding to other codings. But then that line of, right, oh, but you can't copy the code that it just generated.
Right.
But I think people are trying. And then there's others who I think are still on the side of this is detrimental and this isn't going to be helpful. And I think there's feedback on both ends. I think also depending on maybe the area of study, there's some people who are more apprehensive than others. I know our School of Business is like, we've got marketing and we've got PR. How can we get students using this? Right. Whereas, maybe some on the more writing side are a little apprehensive of like, well, they're just going to keep copying papers. But how do we, again, even with that, find some creative ways that they can use it more on the research side of their papers? So the feedback is all over still.
Well, it's pretty new still. Yeah, we're still trying to figure it out for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it kind of changes like what it means to be a student, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. Okay, like you said, it's a very powerful tool. People are abusing that tool, though, because it's easy. Because it's easy to just type in a prompt that says, or you get a question as an assignment from a professor or a teacher, and you say, well, type me a 5-paragraph essay that answers this question. But so it's kind of like, where does the student sort of start and the AI end? And where's the blending of that? And it's so new that everybody's sort of infatuated with it, but still kind of doesn't understand it. It's like this thing that just sort of landed here from outer space, and nobody, we kind of get what it does, and we can kind of see the future of it, right?
Yeah.
We don't totally know what that means for us in relationship to it. So I don't know. It's like a strange and brave new world, sort of. But I really do wonder, again, what it means with the utilization of this resource. Like, what does that mean for students? What does it mean to be a student with AI? I don't know that anybody knows, but it's like this weird sort of opaque, boggy space, right? The teachers are trying to figure out, students are trying to figure out what's okay, what's not, how to utilize it in a way that it doesn't just take over thinking for us, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't have, that capacity to think, what does it mean to be a human being there? I mean, there are some things that it can do that are just sort of utility, which is great. Okay, we don't have to remember a number of things. It can pull facts for us. But that critical thinking piece and that sort of human piece of what it is to be conscious and thinking, right? That's where it gets like to be a science fiction story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that critical thinking and original thought, I mean, that's literally, I teach a first year seminar course, right? So I'm trying to teach these students right from the very beginning, original thought. Like if you are using AI to the extent that you no longer have original thought in that, right then and there should be a red flag, right? I think that is a very tangible, very simple is, are you putting in original thought into what you're doing? Because it is so easy to just, like you said, put that prompt in there and it's going to write you your 5-page paper, right? And right there, that should be a red flag to any student. Like, oh, this is not my original thought. Plus, I warn students, we have Turnitin, we use at the institution. So it's a plagiarism check. So you're going to turn in your paper. And now that it's been generated by AI, it's in the system. So you think that you're being slick, but now it's going to come up in the system as plagiarized. So it's accounting for that. So we have resources that are going to help us as instructors see that this paper was generated by AI. But I don't think that they're really fully thinking that through sometimes, right? So I tell them that, like, be careful what you generate too, because you might just accidentally plagiarize because you were trying to get some example or here's a sample paper, but then you copy too much of it. So I think there's enough checks and balances that I feel confident that the more we incorporate the use of AI, it's just going to get better for our students and for us. Because I think people will understand again more confidently where those lines are and be able to have better, critical thinking, like you said, ethical decision making. But they got to be taught how to do it.
Which is something I'm really surprised at that I've found, because most people think the 20-something generation would be jumping all over AI with both feet, really excited about it. I have found probably 50% of the students I've talked to, they are scared to touch it.
Yeah.
They are like, ooh, I don't know, Tammy, do we really want to try this? Because I encourage trying it in ways so we can see what it can add to what we're doing. They're like, oh, I don't know about that. So that really, I've told other people outside of education that, and they're like, really? We thought they'd just be embracing it. They're leery of it.
Yeah. I see that too. I see that as well. I don't know what percentage I would say here at our institution, but you're probably right. I would say there's a good number on each side of the fence that some are like, oh yeah, okay, let me try this out and give it a whirl. And others are like, I don't even want anybody to know I ever logged in to think I would be cheating.
Absolutely. So, they're really scared of what it might be able to do that might be, the word I keep hearing is creepy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like, I don't even want to link it with my Google account. How do I not do that? And I'm like, no, I don't track your Google account. Like, no professor's going to know. But hey, whatever keeps them, on the fence. But again, I don't want people just to fear a new resource just out of not knowing.
So I think it is important to present ways that you can say, this can help you to kind of create an idea to go from, like, when I teach a news writing class and they have to do interviews, they, well, what do I ask my interview? Well, why don't we try AI and get some sample ideas of questions that you might ask under that topic. And it pops up 3 or 4, and that kind of primes the pump, so to speak. And now they're coming up with their own, and it's just...
Get you started. Yes. Yeah.
They like that. They're like, oh, wow, I like this. This is cool. Just as an idea generator.
I love that. Way to go. I love that you're incorporating that.
Well, I think if we ignore it, like you said, we've got problems. It's here to stay. It's not going away.
Right.
And we can't ignore it because then it takes on a life of its own and it becomes this insidious monster or whatever.
Absolutely.
We want to tame it and train it and utilize it. So we started through some faculty seminars just looking at here's how we might bring it into the classroom. And, just experimentation. Yeah, some of those have turned out to be really, really valuable.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, and I think you pointed on, we also have just, seminars, some workshops around AI for our faculty, because I think it starts there. I think, more faculty feeling confident using it will help the students feel confident and understand where those boundaries are.
As I know, when it first came out, a lot of professors I'm friends with were like, oh, God, no, we're not going to bring that in. That's a horrible thing. And they were like, no. And now it's like, okay, calm down. It doesn't really bite, but let's see how we can tame it and train it. And now the professors are embracing it, and that's going to, come slide down to the students.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what are you guys talking about in those seminars and stuff, Tammy? Like, what are people, what's the reaction? And how are you even introducing it?
Certainly those seminars have changed over time, Joe, because initially we were all kind of dragged into them, and we're all going, this AI thing, what are we going to do about it? We're going to kill it. How do we kill it? It was a very confrontational kind of thing with everybody going, boo, hiss, AI. And the poor facilitators were kind of going, but I want to talk about it. No, we don't want to talk about it. It was really weird.
Right.
It was strange. I remember the first time I thought, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. I can work myself up to it. I really had to work up to it for about a day because I thought I might open a door to who knows what.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like this weird portal that we don't know. Like, it's like kind of Pandora's box. Right? Like we want to open it, right?
Yes.
But we might get in the Indiana Jones movie.
Yes.
Like we get, right?
Right, a Twilight Zone film or something.
Yeah, totally.
It comes out of your computer and now it's in your house.
Exactly. And you can't get rid of it now.
Right.
But that's kind of what's going on, right?
Yes.
It's like, it's definitely out of the box.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we work with this thing that we've created that is kind of a part of us? It emulates us and is able to kind of run circles around us and spin us around while it's doing that.
First, one of the key points in the seminars I went to was that it doesn't think. We say intelligent, so we think it thinks. It doesn't think. It accumulates things. It compiles information.
Right.
And then it weaves all that together and comes up with its answer, solution, whatever you'd like to call it. So the fact that it wasn't a thinking being, once people grasped that it doesn't think, then it was not quite so insidious. And then as the facilitators started saying, okay, here's what you want to do. First off, you want to start talking about it in class. It's not like a dirty word.
Yeah.
Start talking about it. And then show students based on whatever your subject is. That means you have to do some experimenting with it, guys. So get brave. Say, here's what we can do with it that would be good. And like I said, generating questions for an interview, or in teaching journalism, if I'm doing a story on air pollution, what kind of person would I talk to? Where would I find a guest to talk about that? Finding ways that we could use it in a positive way that didn't mean put in your prompts for your paper and get your paper generated.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the discussions had to kind of evolve with our understanding of it. And once we kind of understood more of what it is and what it isn't, then looking at how we can use it. Now, these seminars I've been going to, it's very positive. Everybody's like, look what I just did with it. Look what I did with it.
Yeah.
It was an evolution because at first we really did feel like it was this invader from who knows where.
Yeah, absolutely. I know even for us, we had to also adjust even some of our policies, like our academic integrity violation, like policies. So like, we've got to do some actual institutional policy changes around this. And I think that also helped faculty understand, like, we've got it. We see, right, we're putting some parameters on this for you as far as policies go. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the more that people share how they're using it in the classroom, it helps inspire others and gives those ideas. Like there was an English professor who had students take a quote from one of the early American literature readings that they were doing at the time and then use AI to generate a photo that somehow mirrored or reflected that quote, like whatever quote hit them. And they came up with these like these images, and it was just so beautiful. And I think it really helped the students also like make that lesson stick for them because it gave them a visual aid when you're reading some of this American literature that's so thick and dense, and it's hard to like then have visualizations that you may not have ever even had the opportunity to see, you know? So for those visual learners to bring that, you know, written work into the picture form was beautiful. And I thought that was so creative. And then others were like, oh, that's right, I could do that, you know? So even in an English course, like a literature course. So it is, I think it's getting more exciting and more inspirational as people share how they're using it.
Well, I really have to applaud something in higher education, and I'm sure this is probably happening in high schools and even probably earlier in some cases, is oftentimes we've been really slow to address and integrate new tech.
Yeah.
And we jumped on this the minute it almost hit, which I think was amazing to see because students are going to be graduating outright into the workforce. The workforce is trying to use it too. So our students are coming out with super cutting edge tech and knowledge now. And that just is unfortunately sometimes not the norm.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I was amazed. I was amazed at how quickly we jumped on it, integrated it. We didn't, as I've taught for more years than I'll say, but sometimes I've just seen us sit and kind of watch it for a while. Like, is it going to go away? Should we talk about it?
Right.
Boy, we tackled it. And that's what we need to do nowadays.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the timing too, right? Because it was right around COVID. We all experienced this virtual classroom and all this. And then right off of the tail of this was like, oh, and here's another technology. So we were like inundated. And I think it was just perfect timing too, right? Like,
for once.
Hey, we've been primed a little. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Joe, you work with younger kids. Are you seeing some of the younger kids that you deal with at Middletree? Or are they talking AI? Are they trying it? What have you heard from the younger set? Anything?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I think that they're all about it. You know, I mean, we've witnessed a world around long enough to see an evolution go from, you know, schools abandoning, you know, being so worried about cursive to then not being worried about handwriting in general, right?
Yes.
And then a world here recently where even typing itself is kind of becoming a lost art, right? Because students could do it with their thumbs,
I can't,
you know, on a device in their pocket, right? And now they're just talk texting everything, right? So it kind of makes me wonder if not only the art of writing, I mean, we think now calligraphy is some kind of ancient art. I wonder if handwriting itself will kind of go that way.
I hope not.
Along with typing. And this is where it gets super wild, right? I think one of the beautiful things about how we're constructed as human beings is that through language, what I'm doing right now, and I'm terrible at doing it, everybody can kind of see the gears behind my mouth kind of grind and halt and get staggered and all of that, because language is this like very alive and real happening that's very imperfect, and speech along with that, right? As you're trying to process things in real time and, you know, take in what's beyond you and have that come into you and then spit it back out quite literally. And so I wonder, with this whole advancement of technology, what does that whole process look like? If we're able to just understand things right away, like again, it's a sci-fi movie or it's The Matrix or something. I wonder, we talked about before, well, what AI does is not really thinking. Well, does AI think what we're doing is really thinking? What is thinking really, right? So I think all of those things, I think what it is to be a human being is such an interesting question, period. And then you throw in this whole concept of artificial intelligence, or what we call artificial intelligence. Are we going to think that artificial intelligence really, at the end of it, is artificial per se, or is it more organic? What intelligence actually is itself. So the irony of all that is I hope that made sense, because I'm not really sure that it did, right? Because we're processing this stuff in real time. And again, language is sort of this marvelous and miraculous art that it's so imperfect. It's kind of like jazz in its own way, right? It just sort of bumbles along and you kind of pick up the thread of it. And people sort of understand what you're saying because they have a relative idea about speech and language and words and ideas and all of that stuff kind of comes together. But it's sort of this beautiful process that we get to work out things in real time. And then when you're working those things out in real time through language, you have this experience of understanding it yourself in a way that you may not have been able to do so had you not gotten to work it out through speech and through this externalization of ideas that you didn't even know that you had. Again, this is where like this coalescence of artificial intelligence versus human intelligence and what is it to be AI versus organic intelligence is going to be really, really interesting. And like you said, Tammy, like it's come so fast. So quickly at us, right? I think it was just 2 years ago. I was the one to bring it to my millennial staff. Like, have you guys heard of this ChatGPT thing? No one had.
Right.
I think it was 2 years ago this month. I think it was. And now it's just ubiquitous, not only on everybody's minds, but in a lot of the tools that we utilize with all the technology that we have at our disposal.
We can't lose, in my opinion, not just in education, but just us, period, societally. We can't lose, and we've started to, and I'm hoping maybe I see a tiny U-turn here. We can't lose the ability to talk to each other one-on-one.
Right.
Throw the electronics aside, throw it all aside, look at each other when we talk. And that's something I know with my students, I'm pushing those kind of experiences in the classroom where they actually have to sit down, look at each other eye to eye, have discussions. We can't lose that kind of communication skill. And I think for a time, we were on the verge of starting to really slide down the hill on that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I see, especially this newer generation, the last couple of years with these students, they're eager for that. I think that authenticity, that realness. And there's a quote I always share in class when we're talking about critical thinking, but critical thinking is the art of thinking about thinking. Yeah. And so why do you believe what you believe? Where did that come from? Where did that belief stem from? Why did you make that opinion? What information did you receive that gave you that thought? You can't get that in ChatGPT, right? AI is not going to give you that. So I think the more that we can craft and create environments, whether that's in the workplace, in the classroom, wherever, where we're not just giving them the simple, give me this information, but we're challenging them to say, don't just answer this question, but tell me why you think that. Yes. Where did this come from? How did you form that opinion, right? Look at your values and beliefs. So it's getting deeper and making them think about thinking. Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. I'm going to borrow that from you. Do it. I am, because it's perfect. For sure. Because it is perfect, right? Because that's where like this gets, again, even more interesting is you're thinking about thinking, which is something that, again, is so reflective, is so human, is so kind of the basis of the art of philosophy itself. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the simple distinguishment between what we call artificial intelligence and real intelligence right now, is there's this self-reflective capacity, right? Absolutely. And we don't want to lose that. Of course, we don't want to lose that. No. Because that, I think, is the essence of what it is to be human, is to have this realization of who and what we are and why we're doing the things we are and why we think the things that we do. And I think education still has such an important role to play within that conversation and for all of us. And I think that that's the job of education, is to make sure that we continue to understand and realize that, at least that's partly the job of education. We continue to understand and realize what we are as human beings. I think we can all agree, at least at this stage of our evolution, not only as human beings, but with technology itself, is that we don't want to lose that part, that authenticity of that human nature of us.
but pessimist in me, and the pessimistic voice is really very soft usually within me, but it does kind of, I feel like, say or whisper to me that like, it's going to look different a little bit, because it's so easy to kind of get into that whole AI space. I mean, look at how easily we talked about it here just now in this conversation. We slid into all the trappings of COVID and the luxuries that the technology afforded us. Maybe that just will be a new modality or some version of that, right, in the future. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's something to be salvaged and something we want to hang on to about that authentic human being, but we're very much at a crossroads in a way that we've never been able to sort of reach before or even think about breaching, between that original human being and that next very significant step towards whatever it is we're walking into.
Well, everything's moving so fast, and we're striving to keep up and make sense of it for our students. We have to do that. We have to do that. Yeah. So it's contingent on us to understand it and figure it out and be able to pass it along to them.
But another question I wonder is like, is that what students want, right? And is it our job as educators to tell students what they should want or guide them towards? We want to tell them about this way by which, we exist, and then also kind of let them make their own choices, I suppose, kind of.
Well, I think it's about presenting it to them.
Right.
Good and bad, because when I talk about particularly AI, I will talk about the good and the bad. I'll bring in examples of bad uses. I'll bring examples of good. So I think respecting them as intelligent human beings, albeit young and not with a backlog of experience yet, but presenting both sides and saying, okay, guys, here's the good, here's the maybe not so good, and let's figure out where you stand. You have to figure out where you stand, how you're going to work with it. I think we just have to present it properly.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. I think it's equipping them and putting it in their hands. But I think, again, I a little earlier touched on, how do they know how to make ethical decisions if we're not giving them the parameters? If we're not, because they're going to come across it at some point. Some point, they're going to be exposed.
Yes.
So I would rather, hey, let's get in the front of it and let's say, hey, here's the guidelines, so that we're at least giving them the information, the resourcing, and the how-to, so that they can make better decisions with it in the long run. I would hate to know that someone graduated from here, went into the workforce, and gets fired because they misused it on a presentation. Who knows, right?
I agree.
So I would so much rather equip them now than risk them just having no idea. I feel like we're doing a disservice.
Oh, boy, you and I are there on that.
Yeah, and that begs the question, like, so what's the responsibility of an educator? What responsibilities do educators have towards their students? Not just in regards to this, but in general. What is the task that we're ultimately handed when we get into education? And I feel like, again, maybe that pessimistic voice within me is louder than a whisper than I realize sometimes, because I do feel like so frequently educators impose their own views. Parents do this unwittingly or unknowingly frequently on their children, as they impose their own views on them. And they want them to emulate who they are as people, or pick up or make good on things that they were unable to do or accomplish. And again, unknowingly, I think we sometimes do this. So I wonder if we haven't done that too much within the educational field as well in some regards. And I wonder if there isn't an opportunity here to sort of self-reflect as educators and as education itself as a whole, and say, what's our responsibility to our students, and really take time to reevaluate that outside of our own bias, outside of our own pretenses, outside of the things that we think or how we think things should be and the ways in which they should act, right? And again, just what's our obligation to our students? And are we okay if our students and this new generation sees it a different way and goes a whole different direction with it?
Those are some really interesting points. And Stephanie, we're just going to have you back on for another episode to answer some
Let's do it. Let's do it.
You really are. In closing, Stephanie, you're first generation college, and we have so many first generation students coming into the colleges, which is so wonderful, so fantastic. I was as well way back when. In closing, what piece of advice would you give to a high schooler, or maybe a parent of a high schooler, and they're looking at being that first generation, and it's scary because there's nobody gone before for them to follow? in their family, what would you say to that person or that parent?
I always say, don't do the journey alone. Don't attempt to do it alone. There are so many resources, whether, it's an organization like this that's doing prep to get students and help them with resourcing, getting into college. At college campuses, there are resources on campus. And so that's my first thing is I think that oftentimes being a first generation college student, you don't know what questions to even ask. So you don't know where to go to even ask anything, right? And so I think the first step is just find someone. So whether that's your admissions counselor, ask them, where do I go when I have questions? Get a mentor. That was, I think, pivotal for my experience. I had a faculty mentor who helped guide me. And when I didn't know where else to go, asked her, and then she pointed me in the right direction. Even if she didn't have the answer, she had done the process before me. Right? So I think that it can feel isolating as any student, whether you're first gen or not, the comparison, you can feel lost in the system of higher education sometimes. But I think especially for our first gen families, I think just knowing, even as parents, it's okay that you don't know and you don't have the answers, but you are still their number one support. Be there for them. Ask them how classes are going. Take advantage and learn through their experiences. I think the more that they can also then come home and share and reflect what they're experiencing, the more that the family gets to really enjoy the process together. So I think that's my biggest thing is don't try to do the journey alone. Find that resource, find that mentor. There's so many resources out there on campuses, and there's at least a person on that campus that wants to be that support for you. For sure.
I love that. Don't do it alone, right? And I think that's just another obligation of education. And another thing that you understand once you get involved in education is that we're all on the same kind of journey and path, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think getting into higher academia does reveal to you. And I think that's one of the obligations of the institution itself is to make students understand that this is a shared experience and that we will help them guide them through it. I think they are so important within the institution itself in making students understand that there is a home, there's a community there. And I think that's such an important aspect of school itself, regardless of the institution.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yes,
and
thank you both. This was incredible.
You have added so much, and thank you for understanding so much and working so hard for your students. It sounds like you're doing a great job out there at Azusa Pacifc University.
Thank you so much.
Our guest today, Stephanie Gala. She is the director of the Student Success Center at Azusa Pacifc University here in Southern California.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.